or Monday of this week, January 29th, was the one-night only premiere of 85, the greatest team in football history, the Scott Prestin directed documentary on the 1985 Bears, and I can stand to that title that is absolutely truthful right there. Greatest team in pro football history, at least the greatest defense in football history, I will say. God, there's so much to say with the 85 Bears. Joe, did you watch the 30 for 30 documentary?
I love the 30 for 30 film.
Yes, and I think the worst thing about the 30 for 30 documentary is now it's going to make every subsequent documentary on the 85 Bears inferior because it was that good.
Okay.
It was
That's
that brilliant.
what I want to find out from you.
So I will break this down, though. I'll go into it briefly, okay? But first off, I want to say this. As I settled in to watch 85, the greatest team in football history during the one night only showing, I was watching, they had a bunch of trivia on the screen, like, trivia during it. And this was like I said, it was a packed crowd, okay? So I'm watching the trivia and stuff, and it was like one log brag reel about the accomplishments of the 85 Bears. Did you know that in the 3 playoff games that the Bears played that year, they outscored their opponents 93-10?
Yeah.
In the playoffs that year.
My dad brought that up. My dad loved the 85 Bears because, he grew up when that was going around. He was crazy for the Bears.
They beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl 46-10. They routed them in the Super Bowl. I think that's one of the biggest. I think that's one of the biggest. I think that's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, blowouts in Super Bowl history.
Really?
I think so. It's up there.
I'm trying to think.
Super Bowls are usually close. They're fairly close, or there's like a touchdown or a field goal disparity.
I'm trying to think the two teams. It was Seahawks and
Steelers.
Broncos.
Yes.
It was like, I think the Broncos only got 7, maybe 14
That
points.
was that too. Yeah,
that was a big blowout too.
That was like by the half you knew it was over.
Yeah.
That was a lot of the fear from the last Super Bowl with Atlanta and New England. He thought it was over at the half.
New England's GOAT, Tom Brady, came in.
But you know what's funny though is like here's what I was saying though about this when I was watching this. I said Bears fans like myself are hopelessly stuck in the past, and I wasn't even alive for this.
Oh yes.
But on one hand, they had season they had to cheer about. Think about the Bears are coming off another bad season. They had inconsistent play. Their head coach, John Fox, was fired. They have the only thing that's the gleaming light of hope is the fact that the second overall pick of last year's draft, Mitch Trubisky, is going to wind up being your quarterback of the future. Yeah. They've went 14-34 in the last 3 years, and now they got an unproven head coach in Matt Nagy.
Yeah.
So right now and also Nagy is the 4th different coach for the Bears this decade. You've had Lovey Smith, Mark Trestman, John Fox, and now Matt Nagy. So Bears fans have not been given much to cheer about, which is really sad given Chicago market. And they make a good point to detail Chicago sports as a whole in this thing.
Especially with how the Bulls were during the 90s, where we had Michael Jordan, a living legend in basketball. And then we have today in the 2000s, we had the White Sox in 2005. Yeah. We have the Cubs from 2 years ago. We have the Blackhawks who win every other year. Not recently, but for a while, it was every other year.
Yeah, I think the Blackhawks are kind of over and done.
Like every other sport team that we have was doing well. And then we're just kind of waiting for the Bears. We almost had it, I think, in 2006, right?
Yeah,
it was the year.
That was the year.
We almost had it then, and it was taken away from us after halftime. And before halftime, it was like, we're coming back. We have another Super Bowl on our hand. And Peyton Manning said, no, you don't.
No, you don't. And it was... And it was really, too, that whole Super Bowl. That was like one of the last years we were good. It was also, too, I'll tell you right now, one of the things that really helped us that year, too, was the NFC was horrible.
Yeah.
The NFC was horrible that year.
NFC was horrible, and we had a great rookie year from, what's his name? Our punt returner.
Our punt returner to Brad May, or not Brad, that was a punter.
Broke records. God, what kind of Bears fans are we?
Devin Hester?
Devin Hester.
I'm thinking of the punter Brad Maynard at the time. But yeah, and that was really, too. I mean, the only team, we were 13-3 that year. The only team that was better than us, or that was at least, you know what I mean? Think about it. 13-3, we had Rex Grossman as the quarterback. It's unbelievable.
Who was not a good quarterback, for those of you who are wondering.
I will talk about 85, the greatest team in football history. It looks to capture the simpler times in lieu of a woeful present. And nostalgia warms the heart like no other, and that's what we have. So we have a lot of interviews from the likes of, say them with me right here, Dan Hampton, William the Fridge Perry, Mike Singletary, my personal favorite, Steve Mongo McMichael. I mean, we got the...
What about the man man himself, Mike Ditka.
Mike Ditka's in the film as well. And I was going to say, rest in peace, Buddy Ryan, though, because Buddy Ryan's not in it, but he did have a great moment in that 30 for 30 documentary. So we do kind of talk to the players and get sort of a perspective on what the Chicago sports landscape was like for them going in, because a lot of these guys were part of the 1983 draft class, too. So it took them a couple years before the Super Bowl berth and the Super Bowl win. Jim McMahon is a big part of this film as well, and he's always his lovable self. It's hard to not like Jim McMahon, especially if you're a Bear fan. And it sort of hits all the points that you expect. They talk about the dynamic of the defense, the bone crushing of the defense, the partiness, and like the celebrity quality that they took on. Obviously, they give a lot of great respect to the best running back who ever played, Walter Payton, and they give a good fitting tribute to them. But also, the different thing from this and the 30 for 30 documentary, I will say, is that two of the most significant interview subjects in the film, three I'll say, are Bill Murray, Barack Obama, and Ike Barinholtz.
Ooh.
Ike Barinholtz is the actor. He was a Mad TV actor, and he was in Neighbors too. Bill Murray, lifelong Chicago sports fan, he kind of recounts the ignominy of the Bears and the hostility of their fan base. Obama, who lived in Chicago during the time of the team's dominance, he was really new to Chicago too. He even talks about what kind of landscape they provided the city of Chicago. And Obama gives, I'm not going to lie, when I first saw he was in this movie, I'm like, man, what a fluff piece. He's a really good interviewer in this, and he's very, very fun in this movie to kind of talk about.
Just a side note, if you got time, you should check out David Letterman's new show on Netflix where he interviews people.
I'm
and one of his first guests is Barack Obama.
Yeah, Obama is very good in this, and Bill Murray too. Bill Murray is also very well spoken in this. Gives a lot of good depth and sort of perspective from a fan perspective as well. So I'm going to say this about 85, the greatest team in football history, the documentary. It suffers by comparison to the 30 for 30, the 85 Bears, simply because that film was such a phenomenal and complete look at a team that will never be replicated. Its structure, the 85 structure is much looser. It flows through integral pieces of the storylines of the team. It talks about the Superfans on SNL skit, which I stand by as one of the only times SNL was ever funny. The Super Bowl Shuffle it talks about, which was, which you get that in your
the advertisements.
I was gonna say the endorsement deals. It goes through all that, so it does a better job at that than the 30 for 30. But the 30 for 30 also tried to really stay predicated on Buddy Ryan.
That is, to me, the heart of that too is Buddy Ryan's story.
Yes.
Which honestly, I was surprised. It got an emotional reaction out of me. And the thing is, you look at that and you're like, I didn't live through the 85 Bears, but just growing up in Chicago, you kind of have you feel that history of the Bears, especially when you have anybody talk to you that went through the 85 Bears and how impactful they were, how they basically kind of were how the Chicago Cubs 2 years ago and how it swept the nation, honestly, with how they're winning all these games and they go on to win the big, championship game.
Yes.
And it's just seeing, unfortunately, what happens to Buddy Ryan and that team, how it just, kind of fell apart after that. It's emotional, honestly.
And it's his relationship with Singletary, too.
Exactly.
Who I like a lot as well. But, I mean, even they do make the point, too, because one of the things, and I think, and even the players even say, too, the reason why we didn't have another Super Bowl after that, or it wasn't as dynastic as they think it could have been, is because Buddy Ryan went on to coach Philadelphia.
Yep.
He went on to coach Philadelphia afterwards, and it really left a hole in the defense. And then McMahon got injured in 86 and 87, too, and he was on his way out.
Yeah, he was on his way out.
They also didn't contract a lot of key defensive players as well. And that's the one thing, too, in the NFL. If you look at, defenses, man, defenses are not as dynastic as they once were. If you look, the Baltimore Ravens didn't repeat after that amazing Super Bowl. Denver hasn't made the playoffs since, and these are defense teams, you know what I mean? And defensive teams win big games. But at the same time, they oftentimes don't last. And now with the way the league's going in offensive and pass heavy, no huddle offenses, we're going to throw the ball 40 times a game. It's gotten to the point now where the shift has really favored offense. But to end things, though, talking about 85, the greatest team in pro football history, or in football history. It's fruit for the fans who can't get enough of their favorite team, even if they've seen everything before. And that's exactly what this is. You've seen this all before. There's probably not a detail in this movie that you've overlooked if you're a diehard 85 Bears fan. What I thought was funny, and this goes back to, again, modern context too, is one of the things that dawned on me was how we view about the 85 Bears. We love their personalities. We love the fridge. We love the unlikeliness of this ragtag group. I told you before, Mongo is one of my favorite, probably my favorite Bear player of all time, just his cadence I love. But today we're critical. A lot of us, especially sportscasters, are critical of teams like Seattle, like the Seattle Seahawks and Pittsburgh Steelers, who have proven to be emotionally run franchises with explosive players, head coaches that gravitate, being a player's coach, Pete Carroll, Mike Tomlin, players, coaches. The 85 Bears, let's call them like they are. They were grossly arrogant and sometimes toxic in how gritty they were.
Oh, God, yeah.
But at the same time, they got things done, and they gave a city that doesn't get a lot to cheer about something to rally behind. There's actually a lot of great archival footage of how they celebrated in New Orleans and how few New England fans in New Orleans, and how it's flooded. All the bars have bear heads hanging from the
They
from
swept the
walls.
nation, man.
They did, and it's something I would love. I always say, I was going to say, I'd give a non-vital organ to see something like this happen again with the Bears. But again, the documentary's good. It's also directed by Scott Prestin, who's a local filmmaker too as well. And forgiving its missteps, Scott Prestin knows how to capture the importance of the 85 Bears to the city of Chicago, and that's where being a local boy, I think, really counts. I give 85 the greatest team in football history, 2.5 out of 4 stars.